Claire Paquelin standing by at the courthouse. Claire, Nicolas Sarkozy came out of the courtroom and he spoke a little earlier. What did he have to say?
I managed to squeeze in a place among the crowd of journalists who were all vying to get a shot of Sarkozy as well as his soundbite. And what I can tell you is that he said is that he was in a way defiant, but also in a way resigned. As you said, I will sleep in prison. If they want me to sleep in prison, well, I will sleep in prison with my head held high. He said, I'm innocent. He said, this is an injustice. He also said that he would fight until his last coin, his last sou, the French word, to clear his name. He says he has no hatred, no feeling of revenge. He is focused on clearing his name. His lawyer has also been speaking to France 24 journalist Shirley Sitbon, who is here as well at the Paris tribunal, and he has said that the appeal is currently being requested. Nicolas Sarkozy has no regrets because he's innocent, but the only thing perhaps he does regret is that he was unable to convince the court of his innocence.
And he's actually gone after the French rule of law, hasn't he?
Nicolas Sarkozy, a trained lawyer himself, has a complex, that's an understatement, relationship with France's justice system. He's a former interior minister, but he has long complained that judges and magistrates are weighted against him, that they have a conspiracy against him, that they want to get revenge against him. And that is something that within professional magistrates in France, they take that very seriously, and it's not something that they appreciate all that much, which is why we were at that courtroom, that hearing that I just came out of. The judgment was read out over more than 2 hours. It was a very long procedure, partly because there are 13 defendants, 68 offences, there's a lot of material to get through, but also because the judge really wanted to make clear that the judgment that she handed down and the sentence she handed down, they are justified. And she went through one by one, justifying every single accusation, every single judgment, every single decision to make sure that it was really concrete. And so, despite that, Nicolas Sarkozy, of course, will be appealing, but the judge has said that this sentence and this judgment has immediate effect. So despite the appeal that is going through at the moment, this sentence, this judgment has immediate effect.
Stay with us, Claire, because I'd like to bring in France 24's James Andre. James, this is very unprecedented, isn't it, for a former French president who is no longer in the scenes but still has a lot of influence behind the scenes in French politics, who's been sentenced to jail time, essentially.
Absolutely, jail time. Now, it's true that, Nicolas Sarkozy's been basically placed under investigation and in some occurrences actually condemned for some other cases. This is definitely probably the most important case when it comes to Nicolas Sarkozy. But yes, it is unprecedented to have a French president going to prison. And of course, yes, as you were saying, he does still enjoy considerable influence. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, we had François Bayrou receiving all, the political parties at Matignon before he stepped down, trying to convince them that his budget was a good decision. While we had Nicolas Sarkozy weighing on those weighed in in those meetings by, for example, reacting through a newspaper saying what his position was when it came to French lawmakers. And quite a few of those lawmakers actually followed what Mr. Sarkozy had laid out, saying that, he said, I would abstain, I would definitely not vote in favor of the government. He's always been... He is behind the scenes. He is an important, character when it comes to the right wing, moderate right wing of French politics. And yeah, he's a former president. So it is unprecedented. I would also go to say that it's quite unprecedented to see someone walk out of the court having been condemned, actually speaking to the press. This is very unusual in France as well.
Also, the fact that this isn't the first conviction that Nicolas Sarkozy had. So then how do you explain the fact that he continues to wield this influence in French politics?
Well, I think because he's the last right-wing French president from the traditional right-wing party, if you will. He actually changed the name to the current party called Les Républicains into what it is. But you've got to remember that basically this was the party of Jacques Chirac. This was the party, it was the traditional the Gaullist, as we say in French, affiliated party. And he is the last president to have been elected from that party. So, yes, he yields considerable influence. And, yes, he's already been condemned. He was wearing an electronic bracelet just a few months ago. But still, he is considered, one of France's most, I'd say, savvy politicians, and to that effect, of course, to see him today being condemned to 5 years in prison is quite something. I mean, it's a historic moment, I'd say.
Yeah, indeed, Claire Paquelin. Let me go back to you because this case, if you could just remind our viewers what exactly it's about and who else besides the former president is involved here.
There were 13 defendants. 2 of those have died. One of them died before the trial actually opened in January this year. One of them, Ziad Taqeddine, died 2 days ago only in Lebanon. His lawyer confirming that he had died of a heart attack, and he died in hospital after having a heart attack. Now, he was a key defendant in the case, Ziad Taqeddine, but he was also a key accuser in this whole affair. It was Ziad Taqeddine which said, now this is a French-Lebanese businessman, he used to run a ski resort, he had strong relations with members of France's right wing, he basically became a deal maker, businessman. He was convicted actually to 5 years in prison here in France for having received kickbacks from arms deals between France and Saudi Arabia and France and Pakistan. He never went to a French prison because he went and took refuge in Lebanon, and Lebanon does not have a habit of extraditing its own citizens. So Ziad Taqeddine, he came out and said that he personally had carried bags stashed with millions of euros, up to 5 million euros, all the way from Tripoli, from the heart of Muammar Gaddafi's regime, all the way into the French Interior Ministry in 2005 and 2006, when Nicolas Sarkozy was Interior Minister. Of course, he then won in 2007 France's presidential election. Ziad Taqeddine changed his story. He retracted that account and then changed again. He flip-flopped, which for Sarkozy's team was clear evidence that he was an untrustworthy witness. But there are investigating judges now looking into whether Sarkozy's inner circle may have put pressure or even tried to pay him to change his story. Of course, Sarkozy and his inner circle, including his wife, Carla Bruni, they very much deny those accusations. Very complex character, Ziad Taqeddine. He changed his story over the years, but he was a key accuser and a key defendant. But we heard earlier in court today, in fact, the proceedings started with that earlier this morning. The judge had received the death certificate in Arabic. It had been translated overnight into French, and that Ziad Taqeddine died 2 days ago in Lebanon of a heart attack.
Stay with us, Claire, because we're going to play a soundbite of the former French President Nicolas Sarkozy as he exited the courtroom today. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Je demande aux Français
I ask the French people
qu'ils aient voté ou non pour
whether
moi,
they voted for me or not,
qu'ils me
whether
soutiennent
they
ou non,
support me or not,
d'apprécier
to appreciate what
ce
is
qui vient de
happening.
se passer. La haine
Hatred clearly
n'a
knows
donc
no
décidément
bounds.
aucune limite. Ceux qui me
Those
haïssent
who
à ce
bring me
point
to these points think they are humiliating me.
pensent m'humilier.
What they have
Ce
humiliated
qu'ils ont
today
humilié
is
aujourd'hui,
France.
c'est la France.
So you had the former French President Nicolas Sarkozy saying this ruling essentially humiliates France. Claire Paquelin, we had the former French president clearly casting doubt in the independence of France's judiciary here.
That's something that Nicolas Sarkozy has done many times in the past, casted doubt on France's judiciary, suggesting that there is a vendetta, revenge, conspiracy against him, something, of course, professional magistrates would deny. I was standing just a few meters from him when he spoke to the press, and I could just about make out his face as I looked through the different shoulders and cameras and microphones of my colleague. And he in a way, he sounded defiant, but he also sounded tired and very, very serious when he said, if they want to throw me in prison, well, I will then sleep in prison with my head held high.
Claire, James Andre, talk us through the relationship of the former French President Nicolas Sarkozy and the late Libyan strongman Muammar Gaddafi, because it goes back some time.
It's absolutely what this court is. the initial deal between this financing, which this court is now recognizing as to be true, is that indeed Nicolas Sarkozy, when he was an interior minister back in 2005, was invited to Libya. There, he met Muammar Gaddafi. Muammar Gaddafi at that time was in a very complex situation internationally because indeed he was accused, notably by France, of being behind the shooting down of a plane, the DC-10, what was called as the Lockerbie terrorist attack, and was indeed, basically a pariah on the international stage. Also, his son-in-law, Abdallah Senussi, who was, according to the French justice, behind this bombing, was also sought after with a potential condemnation to life in prison. So that was very much the situation for Gaddafi. And what the magistrates believe is true is that indeed during that meeting back in 2005, Nicolas Sarkozy brokered some kind of deal with Muammar Gaddafi in order to finance his campaign in 2007. Then this put this system in motion by which Sarkozy's campaign would be partly financed with, the amount what is talked about. At least this is what's been reported in France. Was 50 million euros that would have helped finance this campaign. And then there's a complex system so that this money was brought over from Libya and indeed used to finance the campaign. Now, of course, it's always difficult for there were four main, items when this. In this court case, and indeed, obviously, this is a former president, so you have to be very, very precise. This is why, indeed, it took 2 hours to read out this decision. But Nicolas Sarkozy is indeed condemned in one of them, which is, this association malfaiteur, as they say, which means basically collusion in order to commit a crime, and this is what he's been condemned for. But yes, this is all about this illegal financing of the 2007 presidential campaign by Muammar Gaddafi. And one of the reasons that this has also been suspected in the first place is just after being elected, he invited Muammar Gaddafi to Paris and received him in great pomp and indeed,
as France usually does,
basically put him back on the world stage, which was seen as part of that deal.
Now Sarkozy has been out of office for a very long time, yet these cases keep popping up every now and then, so it keeps bringing him back into the news, essentially. Like when we had Donald Trump, who lost the previous U.S. election, it felt like he was still the president because we kept covering the various cases against him, and now Nicolas Sarkozy is once again effectively sowing doubt into the legal process here in France, and he's not the only politician to do so.
Now, it is indeed, quite remarkable to see him come up and take a stand and say that indeed this is a corrupt process that was basically designed because of hatred against himself. But the fact of the matter is, it's been going on for 10 years, this investigations. There are indeed a few cases that concern Nicolas Sarkozy. There was what we call l'affaire Bismuth, which Bismuth was basically a cell phone that was used according to justice. He was condemned for that. He was actually wearing the electronic bracelet during part of this trial because of this previous story that was because he was using a phone in order to broker influence through a judge to get information through corruption, and indeed he was actually condemned in this story. And then there's what's called here l'affaire Pygmalion. Pygmalion was another that was also linked to the campaign finances. This was basically a mechanism by which an organization who was taking care of his meetings basically moved money around in order.
So the re-election in 2012.
Yeah, this was 2012. Absolutely, that's correct. In 2012, cases, to spend more money that is actually allowed in a presidential campaign. That one, we don't have the conclusion of that one yet. And then, yes, this is the main biggest story. But yes, when it comes to Nicolas Sarkozy, as you say, he pops in and out of the news. This has been a very long investigation. It's taken 10 years, and of course, this is the conclusion of it. But it is something that's been talked about. I remember covering for France 24, for example, the time he was actually placed under formal investigation and interrogated for 48 hours in what we call here garde à vue, which is basically when you incarcerate someone for 48 hours in order to investigate.
You spoke about the influence Nicolas Sarkozy continues to have on the Les Républicains party here in France. Will this now change anything, or will his followers always be his followers? Because that party, let's not forget, we've had the Patrick Balkany, who's the former mayor of Levallois, who's also been condemned for different infractions, and they continue to weigh a lot of influence behind the scenes.
That's why I'd say it's like, in a sense, you could make a parallel with Donald Trump. I mean, his followers carried on following Donald Trump despite, the Stormy Daniels case. What we have here is, I'd say, something which, in a sense, is equivalent. Once again, for, right-wing. He does enjoy a hardcore fan base, Nicolas Sarkozy, and these people will probably believe that this is some sort of conspiracy and that indeed justice has been, instrumentalized in order to hurt him. And this is very much what he's been trying to say. If you listen to that interview, he says, I appeal upon the people of France to look what's just happened and indeed, take note of it, as in basically rejected. This is what he wants to pass as a message. Basically saying, I didn't do anything. This is something he's been saying consistently throughout all this investigation. He's always said that he was innocent of what's been, what he's been condemned for today. But yes, I mean, most certainly, he will still have some followers, still people following what he has to say. And once again, he is a very savvy politician, but that also means that basically he is not allowed to be elected anymore if this, the sentence is carried out completely, and he will not be able to, to run for any public office. So, will this actually break his, his political aura? I'm not certain, but it will reduce it for sure.
This has his son eyes political office in a mayoral race next year. Thank you very much for that, James Andre there. And just a reminder of the news coming into us that the former French President Nicolas Sarkozy found guilty of criminal conspiracy in a case related to him accepting millions of euros in illegal campaign financing. This for his successful presidential bid in 2007, taking cash from former Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi. The former president says he will be appealing and says he plans on sleeping in prison with his head held high.